Hey guys, how you doing? So, Plants vs. Zombies is a big franchise, and there's quite a few games in it. These games all have a lot of content to offer, and there is a ton to mess around with. But, that being said, not all content for the games is made equally. Some content is simply better than other content, but that's okay. At least you remember some of the extra features, right? Have you ever played Vasebreaker in PVZ 2? Okay, so if you couldn't already tell, this entire video is on the content in these games that is simply forgotten by most normal players. And really, I don't blame these people one bit, because oh my god, whose idea was it to make this real? Now, before we do get into this video, I'd like to clarify that this is just my opinion, and if you actually played and enjoyed the content I cover in this video, then good for you. I'm glad that some of this stuff made at least one person happy, but most others didn't even know it existed. I'm also not covering any games that are no longer available, so while PVZ Adventures and PVZ 3 are gold mines of obscure content, they simply won't be making it into this video as I can't really get any footage of my own for them. So with that out of the way, let's start off with quite an interesting case, that being Alright, let's talk about the tree. So, the Tree of Wisdom is a weird idea in PVZ 1 to say the very least. It's one of those pieces of content that you wouldn't know about unless you were actively looking for something to do in a game you're playing. Like, think about how you would actually need to get to this thing. You would need to not only be in Dave's shop, but you would also need to take the gamble and spend 10,000 coins on a tree that might not even benefit you in any way. So, needless to say, I never bought this tree when I was a kid. But okay, now that I've hyped it up a little bit, let's talk about what it actually does. So the tree needs fertilizer to grow, and every time you feed it fertilizer, it'll tell you a gameplay tip or two, as well as giving you various other responses. There's really not much more to it than that, which is quite surprising as you are spending a lot to get this thing to higher levels. Well, okay, there is one thing you get from growing this tree, and that's cheat codes, but they're not what you think. So when you reach certain milestones with growing the tree, you get various cheat codes that change up the looks or interactions with the horde, such as daisies making zombies leave behind a trail of flowers when they die, or pinata making zombies shower candy when they're killed. Now, that's kind of cool, I'm not gonna lie. However, I did mention before that you have to pay for fertilizer to get these cheat codes eventually, and that fertilizer costs 2,500 coins per pop. At a minimum, if you just want to see daisies on the ground, you would need to spend 250,000 coins on this stupid tree. Oh my god. And here's the real kicker too. The game, to my knowledge, doesn't really tell you all of this, at least not at first. So you might buy some fertilizer for the tree and you'll get some useful tips like having 2 rows of sunflowers. Wow, that's so helpful for the 4 people that didn't know that. But once you go through that process, you're more than likely never going to look back on it because the game only tells you that you'll get information. Like, okay, is that supposed to keep me interested? I'm paying money that could be spent on my Zen garden. Like, come on now. I think with this content, simply telling the player they'll get something eventually for actually investing in a tree would fix this confusion and weirdness immediately. Now, with all of that being said, most people already do know about this content, so really me explaining it here was just a warm-up, because we had to start off with something. Now we're gonna get into the weird stuff. And here we've got quite an interesting starter pick, which would be Okay, be 1000% honest with me. Have you ever played Vasebreaker in PVZ 2? And no, I'm not talking about the ones that appear in the daily levels as events. I'm talking about the actual game mode that's separate from the main game. Did you even know that existed? Because I didn't when I was younger. Yeah, so for those who didn't know, Vasebreaker is in PVZ 2. And not only is it in this game, but it's also been here for a really long time. Like, here before Big Wave Beach. Yeah. And most people still don't know about it because realistically, this is not where you should put a game mode. I'm sorry, but putting it next to genuinely important buttons is simply not the play here. But enough about that, what about the game mode itself? Well, it's Vasebreaker. I know there's at least one person out there who's shocked about that. It's basically exactly what you would expect it to be, and that kind of stinks because there's not really much more depth to it besides it just being a port of Vasebreaker. I mean, sure, there's Garg vases, which means that you'll have to actually think about the vases you break in accordance to where the Garg is, but then we also have power-ups, which is just stupid. Has anybody seriously purchased these since 2014? I don't really think so. Ironically enough, the most interesting part about this game mode isn't even the fact that it's so forgotten by the player base. It's the fact that it was forgotten by the devs too that makes it 10 times funnier. Like, they were working on Far Future, Dark Ages, and Big Wave Beach levels for this game mode, and then they just kind of forgot about it and randomly dropped them in one event, which then did not come back. Like, seriously? Do you guys care that little about your own creation? Overall, this game mode is straight up an anomaly in PVZ2. The only other content in this game that comes even close to this level of obscurity would be like, I don't know, the Endless Zones? But even those are interesting. Vasebreaker is just Vasebreaker. It only appeals to the few people out there who tolerate it. Kind of boring. But luckily, our next entry here is much more interesting, that being... You did not read that wrong. Garden Warfare 1 has endless ops. Let's talk about it. So for Garden Warfare 1, ops was a big selling point of this game. I mean, it's practically half of the game itself, and because of that, a lot of effort was put into making ops as replayable as possible. Now, with that being said, PopCap is not a perfect company. They never made any official way to play endless ops on your own, and that stinks. However, if you play on specifically the Xbox One and PlayStation 4 versions of the game, and you hook up a second controller to play split screen, well, you get access to a completely new version of Ops, and this one goes on endlessly, at least after the first 10 waves. Now, the only person in my house who would even willingly play this with me is not anywhere in my house most of the day, so I can't actually record any substantial gameplay of my own here. Still though, I think this mode is super interesting, and there's a lot that you could talk about with this being a thing. It makes me wonder stuff like, why did this never become an actual feature? Or why would they lock this to specifically to newer gen consoles? Those are valid questions, and if we just ask PopCap Vancouver why this is, and suddenly I have a feeling that I'm not going to get an answer here. Jokes aside, this really is a cool idea, and it's super unfortunate that we never ended up getting any other form of endless ops for regular play. Well, at the very least on that front, we do have mods for Garden Warfare 2, so hey, that's realistically better than playing this like I am, as somebody who doesn't have any friends or family that play PVZ like I do. And while we could end this video here, I have just one more forgotten bit of content that you guys may not have known about, and that is... Oh yeah, you know I had to end it off with a banger. So BFN in of itself is a game that could almost be considered forgotten on its own. I mean, heck, I make so many videos on this game, and I still get comments every once in a while asking if it's Garden Warfare 3 or something. Like, that's nuts. But to the people out there who play BFN like I do, there's really not much here to discuss, except for one quest that almost nobody talks about anymore, that being the yearly pie hunt. So basically, in the month of November, there is an Acorn NPC that you can talk to in Dave Manor. This little bastard has the audacity to tell you to hunt down pies around not just Giddy Park, but also every campaign area too. Now, it's not a particularly difficult quest, but it's annoying enough to the point where I myself have never gotten the reward cosmetic for completing this quest. And I'm somebody who is pretty committed to getting cosmetics in this game. Oh yeah, the reward! It's a bad looking hat. Did you expect something good to come from this? If you did, then let me know why 2 plus 2 is too complicated for you, because of course it wasn't going to be worth getting. This questline is overall so mediocre that most people don't even remember the Acorn NPC existing with it, simply because there's absolutely no hand-holding when it comes to finding the NPC in the first place. And with that final bit of discussion, I think that's actually a great way to segue into the conclusion for this video. It's not, but we're gonna pretend like it is. Now, everything I've talked about here is, for better or for worse, not completely forgotten. But at the same time, I don't think many of you watching this knew about all of this content. So now that you know about this stuff, take a look into it. You might have fun playing Basebreaker for PVZ2, or maybe you'll try to Pie Quest whenever it comes around for BFN. Regardless of what you choose to do, just remember that somebody or some people worked on this content, and letting it disappear into obscurity would be a shame. Even if it's as pointless as a Tree of Wisdom, it's still really interesting to talk about. And now, I'd like to hear about what content you guys believe is the most forgotten in this franchise, as there's really a lot more here that I could have talked about. Seriously, this franchise has so much content that's barely discussed, especially on the Chinese side of things here. Maybe I'll make a video in the future on that side of the franchise with its forgotten content. Oh, and if you're new around here and you like what you see, then subscribe. It helps me out a ton and I really appreciate it. Now, as for me, I'm gonna go ahead and burn thousands of coins into a talking tree. So, I'll see you guys in my next video. Peace.